Yo, what is up guys? Grim here, and today it's going to be a bit of a discussion video on the new patch 3.4 Delve notes. So we've got a lot of big changes to kind of discuss. I'm not going to go over all of the changes in the patch notes. I'm just going to pick out the few things which I think are super relevant to kind of the speed clear slash top tier Delve kind of ladder, and that I actually have knowledge about. So let's get straight into it. I want to cover the nerfs first because there was quite a lot of nerfs in this batch of patch notes. It's pretty unusual for GGG to nerf so many skills, so it's definitely, I think, a bit of a response to wanting the Delve ladder to be a bit competitive. So we'll get started with perhaps the most impactful nerf on all of the patch notes, and that is a massive nerf to spell block. So, if you guys don't know, block is a mechanic which allows you to completely mitigate a big hit of damage or any hit of damage, and it caps out at around 75% for most characters. Um, in Delve, this would have been one of the main mechanics that you would use at lower Delve levels to really survive. Potentially indefinitely. If you combine dodge, which is caps out at 75%, and block at 75%, you eventually will get to a point where you have about 90 to 95% chance to avoid all damage if you have those both at a cap. And that was probably going to be one of the better strategies behind delving at the lowest depths. So I think that this is a very appropriate nerf to spell block, and basically what the nerf is they've just restricted the amount that you can really get on items and on the tree. You have to kind of get it fairly now instead of just converting all of your regular block into spell block, which is what people were previously doing. So, what kind of an effect does this nerf have on the future content? Basically, it's going to make it a lot harder to get that 75 cap of block and dodge. And that's going to be a very, very important thing, in my opinion, for the highest delving players to get. So they've made it harder, meaning you'll have to invest more in it, meaning your damage will be lower, and the kind of barrier to entry to getting that cap will be like a lot more expensive. So you're going to need to grind for more gear, you're going to get more specific pieces, and you're probably going to have to use stuff like reckless defense jewels on the tree to get to that 75% cap on a lot of characters. You may also be forced into using a shield, which will heavily restrict the amount of builds that you can play if you're looking for that kind of tanky, defensive, dodge block kind of style of play, which is not a great thing in my opinion. I think it would have been fine to leave the items the way they are. In its previous state, you could get max block on stuff like bow characters and all that, but now it's going to be very difficult indeed. So block nerfs, massive hit to survivability in Delve coming up. We'll have to see how that plays out. Next up is a nerf to clear speed. They have hit shield charge with a big nerf hammer. So previously, shield charge scaled off your weapon attack speed. Items like Brightbeak were extremely powerful because they had a lot of attack speed and they'd make you shield charge much faster. Now, GGG have decided to make weapon attack speed fairly irrelevant for the movement part of shield charge, which is the main part of it. However, they have changed how shield charge has a little bit of stats now. So you can actually get 20% movement speed, or 21 if you get a 21 jewel from the skill. So it's definitely not going to be anywhere near as fast. Basically, people are wondering, is shield charge still going to be the premium skill? It's definitely going to be good still. I think I would still use it on pretty much every shield-based character. I would maybe consider using Whirling Blades. I don't think Leap Slam is good for anything but two-handed weapons. I think Shield Charge is still probably going to be number one with a Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline. Whirling Blades is probably going to be a close second now due to these nerfs. And then, obviously, if you need to, you can use Leap Slam for two-handed weapons. I will say, though, I do think this is a good change. It was very frustrating to have to use Bright Beak on every single shield charge build and really not get the opportunity to use a really cool weapon, like a rare crafted damage weapon or something like that. It really felt kind of bad, especially playing something like EK Nova or Blade Vortex. not having an option to kind of go for that damage unless you sacrifice speed. So it's good to kind of get that available to us and not feel bad about losing out on clear speed. So I think it's a good change overall, but you can start to see a bit of a trend here. They're going to start hitting the clear speed meta, which is fine by me because we have a new endgame in Delve. Next up, we got a Flame Dash buff. So Flame Dash is a pretty underused skill. I actually really like using it in conjunction with Shield Charge. I feel like it's a lot better to use in combat, especially in stuff like breaches, and it's a lot more reliable in maps like Primordial Pool, of Days of Old, and stuff like that, where there's a lot of congestion in the map, and you can get stuck on stuff like barrels, because Flame Dash will always get you over there. Shield Charge can get stuck on things. So I think a nice package of Shield Charge Flame Dash is going to be really good, and they've made that even nicer with reduced cooldown, which is excellent, and it now goes a further distance as well, meaning it'll be a lot better for like leveling the story arcs and stuff like that, especially in Act 2. I can imagine it's going to be a lot better being able to actually get over the river with Flame Dash. So a nice big Flame Dash buff, which is going to be really good. Next up, Kinetic Blast. This is the one everyone's talking about. I think that it's definitely a nerf, but it's a nerf that was deserved. I think GGG have decided to push Kinetic Blast in a certain direction, and that direction is AoE clearing. I don't think they enjoyed the fact that it was one of the best single target spells if there was a wall nearby. The term wall banging basically meant if you stood next to a wall with the boss on the wall with Kinetic Blast, all of the bullets would basically shotgun it out of your wand, and it would do more damage than most single target abilities. That is no longer the case. They've stated that you can't shotgun walls with Kinetic Blast anymore, and if they've done their job right, people won't be doing that anymore. However, I do think it's still probably going to be the best or one of the best clear speed AoE abilities, specifically in indoor maps. While you can't bang the projectiles off walls anymore, they will still explode when they do hit the wall, which is very important to note. So in maps like Toxic Sewers or anything like that, like Underground Sea, you will still get a lot of clear from your Kinetic Blasts. And I still think it's going to be the best league starter out of any clear speed kind of meta build. And I will be probably starting off with Kinetic Blast. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one is it has one of the best unique weapons, which is fairly common in the game, being Piscator's Vigil. It's very easy to obtain, and it does a ridiculous amount of damage. It's basically like you get a mirror tier wand on day one. That's kind of the level it's at. It actually beats most mirror tier wands, unfortunately, at least on what you can craft in the league early on. So it's definitely very powerful, and that's part of the reason Kinetic Blast is so strong. Until they nerfed Piscator's Vigil, it's probably going to be equally just as strong. So yeah, Kinetic Blast definitely going to be really good. I'm going to be using it until I can get my gear for whatever else I'm going to be playing. So don't worry about it being nerfed, you can still use it. So the last one here is probably one of the most impactful things on the Delve meta, in my opinion, and that is the Elemental Hit nerf. So Elemental Hit was definitely the most broken skill in Path of Exile in the past patch, I would say. The skill is designed to have very high base damage, but you only get to choose base damage of one element. So basically you had massive cold damage, massive lightning damage, and massive fire damage. And you alternated between them, not being able to do all three of them at once. However, there was a design flaw in the skill, and you could convert all the damage of all the elements into one element, basically allowing Elemental Hit to do 3 times as much damage as it was designed to do, making it way overtuned above any other ability. And it was going to be way too powerful in Delve, especially in groups, and it would definitely have been the top dog outside of something like a Xerfes Indigon build. So it has received a nerf, but the nerf is actually pretty minor, in my opinion. They've nerfed the damage by about 1/3. On initial look, it might look like they've nerfed it a lot more than they have, but the way they've worded it is that you'll only lose 50% of your lightning damage and 50% of your cold damage. So you still get half of the lightning damage from the skill and half of the cold damage. So you still do basically get to do double the designed amount of elemental hit damage with the skill. So it's still going to be very powerful, and I would say one of the best delving builds. So out of all of that, spell block is probably going to still be very, very powerful. It's just going to be harder to get. Shield charge, probably still the best movement skill. They've definitely compensated a little bit by giving it some movement speed. It won't be as strong, but we now have a lot more damage options, and it's going to feel a lot better to kind of craft some weapons and stuff like that instead of just using Brightbeak. Flame Dash has got a nice big buff, no complaints there. Kinetic Blast is just no longer a single target ability, so you'll probably have to combine something like Barrage in with your Kinetic Blast or Elemental Hit. Most likely Barrage though. And then Elemental Hit has received probably about a third, 30% to 35% damage nerf, which is pretty bad, but when you consider it's doing 100 million DPS in groups with the right setup, 30% is like neither here nor there. It's still doing way more than any other skill really in the game realistically can do. So those are the nerfs. I want to quickly talk about the new stuff they've introduced. So they're introducing a new mechanic to the Atlas called a Shaper's Stronghold. So Shaper's Stronghold is basically a super Shaper influenced map, which can spawn randomly, and it won't go away until you complete it. So it's kind of going to allow you to box in Elder if you wanted to go that way, and will give us some more options to really influence our influence. So I don't know exactly how this mechanic is going to work. It will be a little bit of trial and error and experimentation when we can get our hands on it and see what we can actually really do with it. Because it may allow us to create a Elder bubble again. They were fairly unreliable in this patch with Incursion. A lot of the time Elder would despawn or Shaper would get overtaken and Elder influence would go out of control. But maybe these Shaper Strongholds will allow us to maintain that a little bit better. So I'm pretty excited about it. In addition to that, they have some pretty insane rewards. Initially, the map will have multiple Shaper mods on it. This is a big deal because it means that we might have increased chance of getting the Divination card box, which is a natural spawn in Shaper maps, as well as a few other things. On top of that, bosses in Shaper maps also drop sextants, chisels, and league-specific items, mainly uniques. So this is pretty big. If we can find a way to reliably get a ping pong effect, including Shaper Strongholds, it's just going to yield a lot more currency and loot for engaging in the influence mechanic. So if we can kind of set up a few Shaper Strongholds to contain our influence and then have a back and forth between Shaper and Elder on a map, including Shaper Strongholds spawning in, that could be potentially extremely powerful and yield fantastic results. It's kind of funny though because it will push people more towards doing one map once again, but that seems to just be an inevitable result of influence anyway. So that's going to be Shaper Strongholds. In addition to that, they've also shortened the Shaper Freeze animation RP event when you get to the boss. So this was one of my biggest pet peeves with the whole War for the Atlas mechanic, and part of the reason the Elder Ring was so powerful, because you didn't have to engage in these animations. So the animation lasted for about 5 or 6 seconds, in my opinion, and it really did feel terrible to play with. So they've significantly shortened that. I'm assuming it's going to be 1 or 2 seconds. So that's going to be more clear speed and more fun and less annoyance, basically, which is fantastic. In addition to that, they've also added a new vendor recipe. So these always get people pretty excited. I'm not entirely sure what it will be. I have a hunch that it might be a Horizon Orb, just because of all the stuff they're doing with allowing the Atlas to be completed much easier. But yeah, new vendor recipe, we're not sure what it is. It could be some sort of a racing recipe, it could be a leveling recipe, we're not sure. But I will be interested to see what that is when it becomes discovered. And lastly, I want to talk about the new Zana stuff. So GGG have obviously identified that Atlas progression was a big problem in PoE, and that people were getting frustrated having to buy maps, or on SSF not getting the maps and having to use really weird strategies. So they've decided to give everyone access to unlimited free Horizon Orbs from the Zana mission table, which is definitely an interesting decision. It takes map progression pretty much out of the game. You can now use a Zana mod to basically re-roll any map you have into another random map of the same tier, 5 tiers higher, 10 tiers higher, or into a T16 map. There are a few prerequisites on this, but yeah, for the most part, you can just do that once you have completed the game and the atlas to a certain point. So the result of this is going to be that map progression is going to be much easier, much faster by a long shot, and you can do it without trading. So ultimately, I do believe buying maps of other players will probably be faster in the long run. But if you're one of the first players, that wasn't an option anyway, so it increases your progression speed significantly if you're one of the front runners. So basically, the result of this, in my opinion, will be front runners will progress to Shaper, Uber Elder, farming their specific map much faster. Um, Maps will be a lot cheaper early on. So other players, if they decide to buy them, will be able to get a lot of them faster and cheaper than they normally would be able to. Guardian maps are probably going to have a very solid floor because it's going to be 15C per T16 map, which is the fee to activate the Zana mod for the T16 map variant. So you're probably going to see fairly cheap Guardian maps, probably around 15C to 10C, somewhere in that ballpark range, meaning that Shaper items will be a lot more accessible, and we're probably going to see something like Harbinger League, where the Guardian maps were very cheap, Shaper items were very cheap as well, and that might not necessarily be a bad thing due to the fact that Delve will require quite a few of these items, specifically the ones off Uber Elder, namely Indigon. So basically, it's going to make a lot of things more accessible to a lot more players. It's going to be a lot less frustrating, and it's going to be really good. The last thing I want to talk about here is just the Zana Mod layout here. So we have a few different ones here than normal. We have Onslaught at 2 Chaos, that's not going to be run. We have Bloodlines at 3 Chaos, we might run this one depending on how map sustain is, but with the new Zana mods allowing you to reroll, upgrade, and get T16 maps infinitely, Bloodlines may not be required anymore. Ambush has never been very good, so I doubt many people will be running that. Fortune Fail is not very good either, so that probably won't be ran. Beyond, however, is obviously a very popular one. We may see this run, especially early on in the league, due to the fact that uniques hold such a large premium in the first few days, and Beyond monsters drop a ton of uniques. So this one might be very, very good early on, and of course, all those XP races love Beyond, so this one will be getting a workout from that. Essence is a new introduction here. Is it worth it at 4 Chaos? It gives you 2 essences in the map, so I would argue it probably is worth it at 4 Chaos, but it really depends on the kind of crafting meta and how much essences cost. I will say though, I do believe there will be a massive increase in demand for essences due to the fact that Spell Dodge is an essence type that you can use to craft with, and you can craft it on any main armor piece. So that's your chest, your weapon, sorry, not your weapon, your chest, your boots, your gloves, etc. And having 75% spell dodge, I believe, is going to be paramount to success in Delve, unless you're going for some sort of invulnerable build. Next up, we have Nemesis back. So if you decide to want to chance a Headhunter, you can go for that by picking up white leather belts and opening up a Nemesis map. However, I've never really been a big fan of this. It is a new revenue stream for you players who haven't played with Nemesis. A lot of the time, you can pick up white leather belts in bulk in all your maps and sell them to other players for 1 alchemy each. However, the market can become quite saturated with these, so it's going to be a play it by ear kind of thing. But I've done that many times, and you can sustain alks pretty indefinitely just by picking up white leather belts if you want to do that. And lastly, we have Harbinger here, which is a very important one indeed. The introduction of Ancient Orbs basically allows Lycosidae to be created very easily. So Lycosidae is a shield which is very sought after, and it is generally a tier 1 or very rare item. But with Harbinger, you can cheat Lycosidae into existence using Ancient Orbs. If you don't know about this trick, I highly suggest looking up Ancient Orb Lycosidae on YouTube, and there's a lot of videos out there. But the gist of it is if you pick up the shields that they talk about in those videos, make sure you buy an Ancient Orb and don't get scammed. So yeah, definitely check that out, guys. It can be a really good way to make money. So that's kind of my opinion. Beyond will probably be used. Essence may be used. Nemesis will be used to chance Headhunter, and Harbinger will be used for the Harbinger orbs and the Ancient Orbs, which can be used to create chase uniques. So good stuff. In terms of my plans, I'll be putting up a video about that soon enough. Pretty good patch notes overall, in my opinion. And I think Delve is going to be absolutely fantastic indeed. I'll see you guys real soon. Hopefully you enjoyed the video.